Welcome to Trillium Healing Arts Peercast. I'm Julia Wolf, energy healer and transformative life coach. In these episodes, I sit down with members of the greater healing community to talk about ways to facilitate our growth, evolve into our true selves, and manifest our dreams. Here, we dive into the art of healing. I am so happy to have Sas Carey here with me today. Sas has worked in the area of energy healing for over 30 years. She is the author of Marrying Mongolia and Reindeer Herders in My Heart. She is also the producer of 4 documentary films following the lives of the reindeer herders. Today, we're talking about the art of energy healing. In this conversation, we discuss how we help clients move stagnant or blocked energies in their bodies. Information gleaned from this movement of energy offers an opportunity for growth and healing in their lives. Sas,
yes.
I am so happy to have you here. After spending 4 days up in the Northeast Kingdom on a vision quest, I find myself having a little difficulty today grounding myself here into my dining room to have this conversation with you. And looking at your lovely face, I am so excited to be here and so happy to have you here talking with me on our topic today of energy healing. But before we dive into energy healing, do you mind telling the audience just a little bit about yourself? What's in your heart?
Okay. First of all, I really like doing an energy healing conversation with you in this mode when you're in a different place, because that's where we go when we do energy healing.
Absolutely.
Right?
Good point.
Okay. So we're here.
Here we are.
I started doing energy healing in 82, but before that, in 74, I went to a psychic to ask if I should stay in my marriage. And the first thing she said was, "You're a healer." I didn't know what a healer was. So she said, "You need to start an Edgar Cayce study group." And I didn't even know who Edgar Cayce was. And so I spent about a year going to all kinds of little groups around Vermont. Some were really crazy, like the one in the geodesic dome where they were growing plants of marijuana, and they were all partaking in it. And it was just, that was on a different level too, where this is in 1970 something. Okay, so finally a couple wrote me who had wanted to start an Edgar Cayce study group. They came from Pittsford, which was half an hour away, and we started one. And we met every week for 3 years, studying a program that Edgar Cayce had, which was called Search for God. And we had to translate all the words because I'm a Quaker, but I don't like to use the word God or Jesus too much. I think of it as more an open connection, light kind of energy, spirit. So that was my real training, I think. And also I was guided to go to nursing school, so I became a nurse in 1982, and I learned about Dolores Krieger, who started Therapeutic Touch. She was a nurse, and that was my first introduction to energy healing. Then I found out that because I was a Quaker and I knew how to connect with a spirit, it was pretty easy because all I had to do was let it come through and connect. And you can get answers for everything if you know how to do that. So that was pretty much the way it started. Then I started a school in the early 90s called Life Energy Healing School. And then I went to Mongolia and did energy healing with shamans and different nomadic herders and people in the city and the countryside for about 30 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
But I would just go back and forth. So I would still maintain my connection with this culture that I came from, and then just connect with the other.
And you studied traditional Mongolian medicine in Mongolia?
I did. The first year I went, we were having a tour of the traditional institute, and my heart started beating like it does in Quaker meeting, and out of my mouth came, "Would you take an American disciple?" And I was like, "Where did that come from? I don't call myself a disciple." And he said, "Yes." So that was in 1995. Kathleen Scacciaferro from Bristol and I became the first Westerners to be trained in traditional Mongolian medicine. And so when he found out what I did, he called it psychic massage.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. Coming from a history of, or a background of physical therapy, someone once told me that I was a muscle whisperer.
Ooh, I like that too.
Psychic massage. I love it.
Yeah.
So we're here to talk about energy healing in particular. And just the term energy healing is so huge. You know, like, what is energy healing? And the way there's something in your book, your book, Marrying Mongolia. If I may I read one of the paragraphs from here? In this book, you say, a healer listens with her heart to life's stories, allows them into herself, holds them lovingly, speaks from her center, and she feels the physicality of another. She holds it in love and light and transforms it to the brightest light possible.
Who would have said a thing like that?
Who would have said a thing like that? It's beautiful. It was well said. And that is what I feel when I am working with a client, that I'm a hollow bone. I'm an empty bowl. I serve as a conduit from the spirit to the person. And it's important for me to get myself out of the way completely and just to hold them in love and light and allow what is to move through.
Exactly. The minute you get in the way, you can either give wrong information. If you move into your ego, to judging, if you're holding yourself, it just doesn't do the work. They can't get it, because then we're taking it for ourselves.
And nothing can come through.
Right.
And maybe we could just back up a moment and talk about energy and how it moves through the body and what we're actually talking about when we talk about energy and the body. The human body is so amazing and so intelligent. And when we talk about blocked energy and allowing energy to move through people, you know, what exactly are we talking about? What happens here?
Well, I have a couple things I think about when I talk to people about that. One of them is energy blockages or static. You're listening to a radio and you can't hear it because it's making too much noise. So what I'm trying to do is help the person release that static and open so that the energy can flow through. I once had workshops with somebody who studied with Barbara Brennan, I forgot who, and she said that if you have, let's say static, if you have static in your body, it's going to get stuck there and it won't work to be helping another person. And she thought of it as burdocks that you find in the cow field, that if you have static already, it's like a burdock and it will add to the other. You have to be really an empty vessel. You have to do work on yourself when you're doing energy healing because you need to keep the static out.
You know what that analogy brought into my mind is yes, the burdock, but also Velcro.
Yeah, Velcro.
If you have
Same.
that nappy side, and we have the statics that we walk through the field.
Yeah.
And then we pick up all those burdocks
Right.
because we have this we're resonating
Yeah.
a certain frequency which attracts.
Exactly.
something that we don't necessarily want to attract. And we don't even realize we are.
It's almost like pulls in like.
Exactly.
So
what you focus on expands.
And I've found with doing sessions with people that if I'm working on something particular, the spirit will give me somebody working on that thing. So I have to really use it for myself too. So I've learned a lot that way.
I see. So if you're doing your self-work.
Yeah, I mean, I remember one day I had this partner and I really liked him, and I'd been with him 5 years or 3 years. And he said, I'm going to go to school in Boston. And I said, okay. And he said, alone. And like 5 minutes later, I had a client who came in and told me the same story, that her boyfriend had left her. And here I am in the other state trying to respond to her when I am totally feeling, because that's exactly, I had no time to clear out or anything had happened just before she came.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah, funny.
Yeah.
It was really funny.
Yeah, real funny. She rolls
Real
her
funny.
eyes. Yes. Maybe funny wasn't the correct word for that. Yeah. And I also discover often messages that come through and stories that are being told on the table. Very often there's some healing for me as well. I receive a perspective. But later I look at this and I think back on what happened in the session, and I realize that I just had a healing myself, because I was just shown a new perspective on a situation in my life that I have the agency then to act upon, right? And if I do, it's like, okay.
I think also by opening ourselves and making sure that the energy can go through, that's a healing for us. So we're just automatically doing healing on ourselves when we're doing it with other people, to be available that way.
Yeah. So, maybe we can shift a little bit to how, I hesitate using the word trauma, but it's what's coming into my mind. Big traumas, little traumas, those 30-second moments that we bury inside of ourselves. And a good example is being at a dinner party and saying something, and you think to yourself, I can't believe I just said that out loud. That's not what I meant to say. And so you just bury it, right? But it's something that's traumatizing in ways. You bury it. It's like, oh, I can't believe I was so unskillful. To a very large trauma.
We're learning about you here.
Yeah. and you're learning a lot about me here, yes. And so to the larger traumas in life, the car accident, the abuse. What happens when all these little events in our lives go unaddressed?
Well, one thing I think when you're doing energy healing, when I'm doing it, is I really don't need to know the little details. I don't need to think of any little details. And, it might come out from somebody, but things can come out without even knowing what they are. So that's another part of being a clean vessel, is you don't need to take any, I think, I don't need to take any of it on. I don't even need to know what the problem is. It seems like there are so many things happening all at the same time in our mind, body, spirit, emotions. What I think about for energy healing is clearing.
I was doing some coursework, and we were learning how to sense a blockage in the body energetically, and learning how to hold it. And so we're learning this technique. There is a point in this when you find this dense energy that you invite the client to let go of that which doesn't serve them, or to let something go, using your own words, whatever you're moved to say, let it go. So I knew this would be coming once my partner found an area that was dense energy. And I had my preconceived idea of what I was going to let go because it was something I was actively working with in my life, and that was doubt, self-doubt. I was in this place where I was contemplating changing careers, and there are all kinds of ways self-doubt was bubbling up in my life. So this was really the work I was working on. So my partner does what she does, and she finds the area that she feels has the dense energy, and then she says, I invite you to let go of that which is no longer serving you. In my head, and loud was, let go of the battle with your father. And I burst open into tears. I mean, I was sobbing, and I couldn't pull myself together. I had to leave the class, go into the bathroom, wash up my face. It was intense. But it's just a beautiful example of my partner did a good job being an empty vessel. And I, as the client, felt I knew what I needed to accomplish in order to, move on in my life. And something came from out of left field. And it was so right on.
It makes me think of an experience I had in the beginning when I first was doing psychic readings, spiritual readings, and somebody said, what is the virtue? And I was like, whoa, I don't really know what that means. So I kept thinking, I was just, what do I say? And meanwhile, I'm seeing a red barn, and I thought, I have no idea. I don't even know what he means by virtue. So I said, well, I see a red barn. And he goes, oh, that's my grandmother's barn. That's the answer. And that taught me to never judge. It's not about me.
It's not about you. It's not about me. Exactly. I had a very similar experience. And what was coming through for me is I just had this sense that, now I work out of a yurt, I just had this sense that Saturn was orbiting the inside of the yurt. I tend not to hold on to these things. I just let them go through, as if you're meditating, let it go. But it kept coming back. And I kind of have this unwritten rule that if something comes through 3 times, that I might ask a question or tell them about it later. Not necessarily, but it's just my way of being sure that it's just not me drifting off or my ego getting in the way or something. So anyway, Saturn reappeared 3 times, and I didn't even think about doing anything about it. And then so I didn't ask her a question through the healing session. And afterwards, we always have an opportunity to have a conversation. And she just looked at me and she goes, did anything come up with, for you? And I said, yes. Does Saturn mean anything to you? And she goes, oh my gosh, yes. And then she launched into this story that helped her connect a number of dots. And I won't launch into her story, but it's just an example of you never know what's going to come through, and you just get out of its way. And if it's meant to be passed on to the client, it will keep knocking. And it's also very important not to put a story around it.
Right. Because that's their story.
It's their story.
Yeah.
It's their story. For instance, your red barn, you may know of a red barn that has some sort of yoga class in it. And you're like, oh, well, maybe you need to move your body more. So we don't want to put a story to it. Let them say, no, it means nothing. And that brings up another good point is sometimes, that same client may have said no.
Yeah.
And it's like, fine. Well, that's what came up. And then 3 months later, that client may, let's see, Saturn, may be talking to an astrologist or something who talks about how Saturn's in her, whatever,
Oh, yeah.
and everything comes together at that moment,
Right.
you know. So we don't know.
Exactly.
We don't know.
Another thing like that is where we see the energy in the body or feel it. I remember one time, I think I was with some class at UVM or something with a lot of people, huge circle of about 40 or 50 people. And I said, well, would anyone like to get a healing? And somebody stood up and came over to me. And she said something like, I have a pain in my back or something. And I just checked her energy field and found that her ankle drew me. And so I said, well, I get something here on your right ankle. And she said, oh, yeah, I broke that 2 months ago. You know, I mean, so sometimes you come through with somebody expecting one thing, but the spirit draws you to another place that they haven't even thought of, which is like your story.
Our bodies are a lot smarter than our minds are in many cases.
Yeah.
Speaking about the difficulty of being that empty vessel, when I first started doing this kind of work, and we've already told the story about me wanting to let go of this doubt, so this kind of all feeds into that. It's very difficult not to be doubting, feeling, or hearing what you think you're feeling and hearing. I started working with this work while I was still practicing physical therapy. And so there were some clients that would let me do a quick assessment of their energy before I would work with them, because they knew of the field I was getting into. And I was working with this woman who had an ankle sprain. She would very, very willingly allow me to do my quick little scan and see what part of her body needed attention. And this would take 30 seconds, so it was really no big deal. And every time, the energy would take me right to her left ankle. And so, you know, the doubting mind is going, yeah, because you know you're supposed to be working on her ankle. Of course it's going there, right? You know, well, whatever. But one time she came in, and the energy did not go past her head. And it felt like I would often close my eyes. I would always close my eyes just so I could get the room out of the picture and try to feel the energy. And it felt like she was swaying forwards and back because I had my hand over the crown of her head. And so I opened my eyes and she was pretty still. And I'm like, well, maybe it's really subtle. And so I had her lie down and I did it from that position. And now the energy felt like it was going from the floor to the ceiling. And I almost just said, you know, my mind, forget it and go work on her ankle. And I said, so tell me, what's going on with your head, kind of humorously. And she goes, oh my gosh, you'll never believe what happened. Yesterday I was vacuuming and I tripped over the cord, landed on my butt and slammed the back of my head on the wall. And right then I became I don't want to say a believer, but at that point I trusted. Mm-hmm. And I stopped putting all of the weight on the doubting aspect and shifting it towards the trusting aspect. Because what I was feeling was that very subtle coup, counter coup motion that goes on in the head after you've hit your head. Yeah. And of course, in the PT clinic, I had to go back down there and start working on her ankle. But at least then I could talk to her about some, you know, mild concussion precautions that she should follow based on this. So it was a turning point for me, even though it was way in the beginning of me starting to work with in the energy aspect of trust.
Yeah, trust.
Trust. Get out of your head and just trust.
I have a couple of experiences that, like what you were talking about too, that it made me think of. One was I was doing a film festival in Estonia, and it was maybe in like 2014 or 16, something like that. Estonia really hadn't been away from the Soviet Union for that long, like 14 years. And they still didn't talk about healing. And they couldn't, that was sort of a forbidden thing to talk about, which shocked me because I thought that was so long ago with the Soviets, but it wasn't. That all that energy was still in the people. So one day, at the end of the festival, I didn't know I was getting an award, but I guess the director of the festival chose all the people that were getting awards, piled them into a boat. We went to his house on an island. We were having just a meeting with a lot of the big donors, I guess. And he started saying, well, Sas, she does this energy healing. And, I could see everybody kind of going, hiding. But and he said, would anyone like a healing from Sas? And this woman said, why don't you go to her husband, this really big guy? And I forgot what she said was wrong, like he had headaches or something. So he comes in, he sits down, I'm in front of everyone, and I test his energy field and his heart. I'm just drawn to his heart, and I just hold my hand in front of his heart. And then I said, I know you said it was a headache or whatever, but I was drawn to his heart. And she said, oh, well, he just had a heart attack last week or last month, I don't know, whatever. And that's why you were drawn to his heart. So everybody kind of, they kind of sat up a little bit straighter because, they were allowed to see this kind of thing in a formerly very repressed society. Wow. Because in Mongolia, their traditional medicine has energy in it, and their shamanism has energy, and I know that's hidden there, but it's hidden outwardly, but everyone does that stuff at home. They do cupping, all these things that are part of their tradition, they still do at home. They don't talk about it out. They're beginning to. They were beginning to when I got there.
So it's part of their lifestyle.
Yeah.
It's not marketed or...
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Just one more thing about that. I was once in my apartment in Mongolia, in Ulaanbaatar, and I looked out the window. There was a huge construction site across the window. It's now like a 5-story mall. But then they were building it with a lot of bamboo and things, and they had scaffolding, and they had a container and across the street, and the guard was sitting on top of the container. And then I look out again, and he's doing energy healing on somebody. But it's still such a big part of their life in another way. I don't know exactly how they make it okay, but it's something they do.
Right. Okay. I see. So it's not strange.
No.
Okay.
Not at all.
Yeah. Yeah. Energy
Right on the
healing
street.
on the street. There you go.
On top of a container at the site of building a mall, and
mainstream.
Yeah, mainstream energy healing. And I don't know what that has to do with. I guess it's just has to do with me trusting, because I just do it, and I trust, and and I don't care where I am. If somebody needs something, I'll give it to them.
That's beautiful.
I'll open to do it.
That's beautiful. And we're learning more and more about energy medicine and how this possibly can be true. In the quantum world, the more we learn in quantum science, the more connections are made between, what the mystics were talking about thousands of years ago, acupuncture, which was being used long before we understood so much else about the body, and then how we see people respond to energy work today. And so these correlations can be made, even though there aren't many large-scale studies on the effects of energy healing out there. There are more and more of them. There's just not the money there for it.
That reminds me of when I was studying traditional Mongolian medicine and learning about Tibetan medicine and Mongolian medicine, and how I came to think of it as they had many ingredients for each medicine, and they were natural ingredients. And I thought of it as the difference between buying fertilizer, 5-10-10 or whatever, and using compost. And compost has a lot of other stuff in it that you're not going to be able to measure, but it's necessary for the process to happen, for the healing, for the growing.
I love that analogy.
You know, in Tibetan medicine, it's quite well known, and they've done a lot of studies, but I don't think studies are the answer.
No, I don't
either.
either.
Quantitative thing. You know, you feel it, you get better.
And you hit on something with the compost. In order to have these effective, or what's the right word, to run a study, they have to control all these aspects and et cetera. But in reality, there isn't a single person on this earth that is equal to another single person on this earth.
Yeah.
And so when we're working with from an energetic perspective, we're working with the whole person.
Yeah.
We're not just working with the liver, with their emotions, with anything. We are working with everything. Back to the empty vessel, the hollow bone, and we open ourselves up and we let happen what happens.
Yeah. Yep.
And that is a beautiful place to end this conversation. Sas, it's been lovely sitting here with you. May we do this again?
Yes, sure. Let's do it again.
Absolutely. Bye-bye now.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. If you want more information about this episode, visit us on the web at theyurt@trillium.com and click on the Peercast tab. A special thanks to Steve Devoni for the production of this Peercast. Thank you for joining me, and may our paths cross again.